Adding this one element to your story will make you more money. I'm Dr. Dan, I'm a neurostrategist, I'm a coach, I'm passionate about the brain, but more fired up to help you take your message to the masses. And in this video, I'm gonna talk about the one missing element that most people never think about and or apply to their story that's keeping them from building trust and making more money. So here's the deal, if you've watched anything I've put out, I get fired up about story.
Why?
Because I've studied the brain. The way we make decisions is emotional. Nothing influences that greater than a story. The research is crystal clear. The fMRI studies have been done. The science is conclusive. Your story will change your entire business if you allow it to. And remember, everyone has a story. Story triggers the brain like nothing else can, and every entrepreneur must use their story if they're looking to sell or convert more revenue. So for me, with all my clients, I teach them a very specific formula called the impact story formula. And really, in a nutshell, I always break it down that there's 3 P's to every effective story. Number 1 is that it has a protagonist. That simply means a character, a main character. Second is that there's a problem. If you don't have a conflict in the story, you don't have a story. And then the third thing is a principle. What are you teaching? How are you relating to everybody listening? Because they don't have to relate to the events or the plot. They need to relate to the theme or the principle. What I want to teach you today in this video is when you add one element into your story, coincidentally is another P, but that's besides the point. This element will transform your story into something that's okay to something that is so believable and so trustworthy. In fact, when I work with my clients and they implement this aspect, they can't believe how one little tweak makes such a big difference, and they never even thought to add this thing. If I won't know the research and how this little hormone called oxytocin flows through the bloodstream, and it's the trust hormone, it's the bonding hormone, and looking at its effect on the body, there's a reason why it's illegal, because artificial oxytocin makes people lower their guard and follow people willingly. Well, if you have something to sell, you kind of want them to follow you. You want them to pay attention. You want them to be influenced by you. Well, I could teach you exactly how to trigger that oxytocin hormone in the bloodstream of your listeners and prospects every time, but do it ethically, without manipulating, and reproducibly, even if you're a beginner. Back to the theme here. What is the main ingredient that you're gonna add? It's called polarity. Let me break it down. Polarity is simply 2 opposing forces or contradictory aspects. How does this apply to story? Well, I'm gonna give you an example. Let's think about a relationship, and somebody was explaining to you that they had to leave their partner. You were out with a long lost friend you hadn't talked to in a while, and they start telling you about their love life, and they explain that I had to leave this horrible girl. And he explains as their relationship progressed, she always fell back into a trap, assuming he was cheating on her because all her other relationships had infidelity. And so he tells the story about how bad she was and how negative she was and how horrible the relationship was, so she had to leave it. That's one story, right? So he could tell that story. But think about the difference that story would be versus this story, where the same guy explains, this woman was awesome when I met her. She was amazing. She was independent. She was strong. She owned her own business. And when I first met her, we'd have long, intelligent, thoughtful conversations, and everything was great. She loved to let her hair down. She also loved to have fun, even though she had a very professional side. And there was just so many aspects. She was just amazing. He tells that side of the story first, then he goes into, and then one day it changed. Something flipped like a light switch, and she just started assuming that I was like everybody else. And one day I came over to her place, and the clothes that I had left over there, she had put on the doorstep and left me horrible text messages saying I'm a horrible person. And that was the beginning of the end. So unfortunately, what looked like it could be great and promising turned out to be rotten. And so you see, there's 2 sides of that story, right? If you tell a story and you have polarity, because the reality is it's true, it's also relatable, and it's also captivating. It hits hormones, dopamine, cortisol, and oxytocin that make that story come to life. The key is the story becomes better, more believable, and more relatable when you have polarity. Let me give you another example in a professional setting. Now let's say I'm a financial advisor and I'm meeting with a new client. How would polarity look in that situation? Well, I can tell you that I grew up and I've always wanted to be a financial advisor because I watched my dad as a financial advisor help his clients and help families build and save wealth so that they had it throughout their lives. And I always wanted to do just like my dad did. That's what makes me so excited about helping you. That's one side of the story. Where is there some polarity that could be added that would make it actually more relatable, more believable, and better? So it could sound something like this. I watched my dad growing up be a financial advisor and help a lot of families. It was my first recognition that that's what I wanted to do. And I'm passionate about what I do. And when I got into this industry, something changed. I didn't realize that the industry started to go more towards selling products and being of interest in what I can make versus the results that I could get for my clients. And I remember that one day walking in with this couple who had a new and growing family and they just wanted financial advice that would help assure their financial future. And I remember sitting down with them and I was going to recommend certain products and investments and insurances that better suited me and what I was going to get out of it versus them and what was best for their future. And at that moment, everything changed for me. My entire business approach, model, and strategies transformed. And to this day, I have not looked back. And what we do is we make sure our clients come first. The results of our clients come first and foremost. And that's what separates us from anybody else in this industry. So you see the polarity in that message and how it plays out? It becomes more believable, more trustworthy. You had a conflict, you had a problem that you had to address, and see where most people say, well, I don't want to talk about that. That's the piece that makes you more believable. It actually makes you an expert as well. Having polarity in your story transforms your message. Because the reality is people buy for one reason, and that is because they feel understood. They feel like you get them. They feel like you understand what their problems are. In fact, a story positions you as the only one that can solve it because you literally explain their problem better than they can. And this is the beauty of story, especially when you put polarity in it. I teach my clients a story formula. I wrote about it in this book called The Trust Formula. And in that formula, the very first step we take is that we describe the upbringing. And the upbringing is where you can create polarity better than anywhere else in your story. In my first business, I ended up doing this without knowing the effectiveness or even that I was doing it. So my first business was a chiropractic practice. And if my story was, you should do what I've been able to do, I was adjusted right when I was a baby, I've never had any problems, I've never had any challenges, I've never had any ear infections, I've never been sick, and this is why you should do it too. Obviously, that's not what happened. That was not my journey. And truthfully, people can't relate to that. That's not how I grew up. That's not how I was raised. You sound like you're better than me. I don't trust you. On the contrary, here was my story. And it was just the realness of my story. I didn't know I was creating polarity, but I was. And that was this. I grew up the middle child of 8 kids. My mom was a nurse. My 2 brothers ended up becoming medical doctors. My sister's an occupational therapist. I wanted to be just like them in the conventional medical profession. And to go along with that, I not only had 1 set of tubes put in my ears because of constant ear infections, I had 2 sets of tubes. I had my tonsils taken out at 9 years old, and every symptom that me and my siblings experienced, we went and got drugs and prescriptions from the doctors because that's what we did. And then I was 16 years old and I got injured pole vaulting and I went to all the doctors. I got the scans, I got the MRIs, and they all said they couldn't help me. Lo and behold, our family dentist said, you should try a chiropractor. We walk in there not knowing what that was. Basically, I was like on my last leg and I thought, no one else can help me. There's no way this guy can. But sure enough, the tides changed. And for the first time, I got relief and help and was able to go on and play sports in high school and college. That's a short version of my story, but you see the polarity. I'm just like you. My story says I'm just like you. I didn't know this stuff. And it allows them to say,
that's just like me.
I do the same thing now in communication. Listen, I grew up 5th child of 8. I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I took 2 English classes in college so I didn't have to take a speech class because I was deathly scared of speaking. I am not a charismatic guru who's just talented at communication, but I've studied it. I've learned it. I have a yearning to understand why we make decisions so that we could take our message to the masses and we could do it reproducibly, even if you're like me, a shy introvert who doesn't have natural gifts of communication. communication. So can you see the polarity? So my question to you is, what polarity can you use in your story? Because you have it. You just have to pull it out. You got to do the work, unpack it, and then start to communicate with polarity. Put the principle of polarity in your story, and I'm telling you, it will take off because you will build a trust that you've not been able to build. It makes your story better. It makes it more relatable. It makes it more trustworthy. And honestly, it makes people like you because they realize you're just like them. And remember, they buy because they feel understood. Nothing does that like a well-told story. I'll say this, your shortest path to your next level of growth and success and scaling of your business and revenue is a well-crafted, well-structured story with polarity. I'm Dr. Dan. I get fired up about this. Let me know if you have any questions. Leave me a comment. Stay tuned for more.